she kept asking, "Are you all right? Are you all right?" I just wanted to blurt it out, but I was afraid that she would say I should have fought harder, or that it was my fault, that I shouldn't have let him do that to me, and that she didn't love me anymore.
Looking back, I think the signs are so clear, you know, how he acted, how he changed. But at the time, nothing was clear. I didn't know the signs. I didn't have a clue what was happening with my child.
Within any parish or school, there are those who have been abused, whether it's sexual or other forms of abuse. It's very important that we listen carefully to what they say, to their story, to their hurts, to their pains, to the ways they've experienced real disillusionment with God and with the Church. They can help us to understand these issues at a much deeper and more profound level.
When I look at a young person or at a child, I see God's work of art. I see someone who reflects the wonder of who God is. And so these young people are our treasures. Whether they are our children in our family, our students, the people we meet on the street, we're looking at somebody who's the apple of God's eye. And as ministers to young people, we need to see them the same way.
When parents bring their child for baptism, one of the first parts of the rite expresses that the parents should be the first and primary teachers of their children in the ways of faith. That is such a powerful statement in support of the parents' mission. I'd like to think of it in this context as well. They are the best and primary teachers in having their child understand how important they are to God, to the family, to the church, to society, and how important it is for them to have the knowledge to protect their own body and their own life.
To be teachers of our children, we must first have the knowledge to share with them. In order to educate ourselves about child sexual abuse, we begin by separating the facts from the myths. It is a myth that strangers are responsible for most child sexual abuse. The fact is, strangers perpetrate 10% of child sexual abuse. 30% is perpetrated by family members, and 60% by others who are known to the child and their families. It is a myth that most child molesters are homosexual. The fact is, most child molesters are heterosexual. It is a myth that priests abuse children because of their vow of celibacy. The fact is, celibacy doesn't cause anyone to become a child molester. It is a myth that children usually lie about sexual abuse. The fact is, only about 5% of all allegations turn out to be false. When it comes to abuse, children can't always tell us when they're hurting.
We'd like to believe that kids are going to tell us if they've been sexually abused, but the truth is most of the time they don't. About 40% of the boys who are sexually abused never tell about the abuse, and about 30% of the girls don't tell.
Child sexual abuse has no boundaries. The pain and betrayal hurt the children first, and then it spreads to their families and beyond.
If you just take a look around, we know that 1 in 8 males, 1 in 4 females will be affected by this before the age of 18. And their lives will never be the same.
But the important thing to remember is that we are not helpless. We have the knowledge to keep children safe. We have the knowledge to prevent sexual abuse from happening.
Sarah, come here, please.
If we use this knowledge wisely, we will have the skills to protect our children. The knowledge begins with 3 important steps. Watch for the warning signs. Act when you see the warning signs. And teach your children ways to keep safe. We can watch for warning signs not only in the children around us, but we can spot warning signs in adults whose intentions may not be what they seem. Most child molesters will do or say something that gives away what they're truly after. Think of these warning signs as violating a child's physical, emotional, and behavioral boundaries. Physical boundary violations are perhaps the easiest to spot.
That's when an adult starts touching too much or touching in ways that most adults wouldn't touch a child. Usually they'll start out pretty appropriately, touching in appropriate ways, but then the touch will get less and less appropriate. A pretty common thing that we see is that an adult will start wrestling and tickling and then accidentally touch a child just to see how that child would react.
I get them to wrestle. I mean, what kid doesn't like to wrestle? You know, playing football. You know, it was really easy to bump into them doing stuff like that and no one would notice.
To push the envelope, I would tickle them, play games, play Ring Around the Rosie, and have everybody hold hands and play, you know, tackle Sam, you know, dog pile and Sam, you know, all the kids run and just jump on me. Get it to where the physical contact is acceptable, where the adult doesn't have a problem with all the kids running and jumping on me. And so that, you know, later down the road, when the child is, you know, sitting in my lap or constantly around me, the adult won't be that suspicious because that's normal.
I realize now that she did touch Alyssa a lot. I mean, she couldn't even be around her, really, without holding her or wrapping her arms around her all the time, even when Alyssa wasn't even in the mood for it.
To protect a child's physical boundaries, watch out for adults or even older children who touch children too much. Always want to roughhouse, wrestle, or tickle. Give too many hugs or hugs with too much body contact. Child molesters violate more than a child's body. They violate their mind. They try to control children by playing on their emotions.
We may see this in their behavior where they're seemingly always around, paying children compliments, buying them presents, otherwise pulling the child in and, in a sense, trying to take control over their life.
Well, first thing is I'd let him know how special I thought he was. You know, if he wanted anything, I'd get it for him. If he wanted to go anywhere, I'd take him. You know, if his mom said he wasn't doing his homework, you know, I'd tell him he needed to do his homework, and I'd help him with, you know, help him. And brag on him how cool he was, anything positive I could say to win him over.
Well, I really felt like he loved me. Before the abuse ever started, he was always telling me how special I was or how much he cared about me. All I had to do was ask for something, and before I knew it, he'd bought it for me. And I look back on it now and I realize why, you know. Why would a grown man be calling a 14-year-old all the time at home or on the weekends or telling me all the time that he loves me?
Chelsea!
Don't let a molester become the center of a child's life. Warning signs that emotional boundaries are being crossed include someone who is spending too much time with a child, calling or emailing a child too often or just to talk, getting involved in too many of the child's activities, acting too possessive. Many child molesters work slowly with the children they want. They take steps to see just how much they can get away with. Over time, a molester will violate a child's behavioral boundaries.
They get the child to be involved with things or issues that they know the child's parents would not agree with. These things might include pornography, alcohol, or drugs. And their involvement with these things might take place even before a child abuse experience begins. But again, it's an attempt by the child molester to gain control over that child.
We'd go over to his apartment and, you know, he'd start drinking beer. He'd give me like one or two, you know, or until I got drunk. And sometimes we would get into he would want us to get into his hot tub. And he would get in, you know, but without his bathing suit. You know, then he'd start Sometimes he put on porn videos.
Once a child's behavioral boundaries are violated, a molester will use threats as another way to control their young victims.
He had actually threatened to tell on me a couple of times, and I would tell him that if he ever told, that he'd get in just as much trouble as I would, that you know, I wasn't the only one doing anything wrong, and he knew what he was doing. And so in that sense, I held that over him.
These warning signs may indicate a child's behavioral boundaries are being violated. Ridiculing the beliefs of a child's parents, allowing a child to do things against the wishes of the child's parents, offering children cigarettes, alcohol, or drugs, permitting children to look at pornography or visit inappropriate internet sites. But spotting these warning signs is never easy. The face of a child molester has many sides.
Molesters are very skillful at keeping their activities secret. They may act one way in front of adults and another way in front of kids. Sometimes you may not even see something suspicious about the way they act.
And so we must look for warning signs in children.
How'd your day go today?
The better you know their routines, the easier it will be for you to notice if something changes or if they start to act differently.
Aaron was always so easygoing. You know, he could laugh off anything. He didn't have a mean bone in his body. But then he changed. He would argue about anything, everything.
If a child starts to complain about activities that they used to like or people that they used to like to spend time with, that child may be giving you a warning sign that there's a problem.
One of the kids that I victimized, I offended against, he called me the big bad wolf afterwards. He would tell his parents that he didn't want to go hang out with the big bad wolf. The big bad wolf was scary, and his parents never, equivocated that that was about the sexual abuse. They just thought that he didn't like me for some reason, and they kept allowing him to be in my care. And so that was another one of the signs that was quite possibly missed, because they didn't understand exactly what a 2-year-old meant by big bad wolf.
Alyssa became very withdrawn from us. It was as if she became a different person. She became quiet and sullen. She didn't laugh. She had no joy. Her activities with her friends just ceased or became very limited. It was not nice.
I knew I'd done something that none of my friends or any of the kids my age knew about. I thought if I told them that they would get grossed out and start saying I was nasty.
When children are sexually abused, often we see a major behavior change. For younger children, we may see an increase in bathroom difficulties. For many children, we see an increase in depression, aggressive behavior, moodiness. Some children will have difficulty in school. Academically, their grades will fall. Difficulties with peers increase. For some children, we also see an increase in inappropriate sexual behavior. All of these are signs that abuse maybe have taken place.
I got very distant from my parents and very moody. Whenever my mom would ask me where I was going, I would tell her it was none of her business. And I would accuse her of not trusting me. I remember wearing makeup and clothes that were too old for me.
Made personally uncomfortable.
Learning to recognize the warning signs in the children around you will help you keep them safe. It is imperative that you know how to act when you see the warning signs.
You aren't going to see a child abuser abuse a child. They work hard, working in secret, so that they don't get caught. That's why knowledge of warning signs is so important. If you see a warning sign, you must act.
The more eyes and ears that we have being attentive to signs of sexual abuse, And the more willing we are to report suspected abuse, the more we will do to help stop this cancer that has infected so many parts of Canadian society.
Alyssa started complaining that she didn't want the babysitter to come anymore. And like I said, I thought the babysitter was really nice, but she just kept bringing it up. So I'd ask her why, and she wouldn't really say. But finally she said that she didn't like the games that the babysitter was playing with her.
If you notice a warning sign, ask your child questions and let them know they can tell you anything. And you should never be afraid to express your concerns to the person you suspect or to a person in charge. You have every right to protect your children.
Let a person know exactly what your concern is. You can use phrases like, "I don't allow Johnny to do that," or "Please don't do that," or "I'm trying to teach my child not to do that." And never let a person's explanation for their behavior make you feel like your concern was unreasonable.
This mom came over to pick up her kid and saw there were 2 other kids over there, and she started asking me weird stuff. Like, did I have a girlfriend? Why are there sleeping bags on the floor? I made up some excuses, and I never had that kid over again.
Offenders know society's reaction, and so they can mask that reaction and be like, no, that's disgusting. I would never do anything like that, And if the parent can see that the person outwardly is disgusted by it, they would think, oh, well, if he's disgusted by it, then he would never do it.
If the warning sign you see is in a program, like a school or a church or a sports activity, then express your concern directly to the person in charge of that program. They want to keep their program safe too. And if you suspect abuse, call Child Protective Services or call the police.
Come here, baby.
There are times when the best action is to just remove your child from the situation.
I kind of suspected something was wrong, but I wasn't quite sure. If I had asked more questions, if I had checked things out, we wouldn't be in this situation. I should never have left my child alone when I was suspicious.
When you see warning signs is the time to act. Talk to your child, express your concerns, or remove your child from the situation. And remember, if you suspect actual sexual abuse, not just boundary violations, you should call Protective Services or the police. We can't be with our children all the time, but we can teach them ways to stay safe when we're not there. We must teach them about their bodies and how to respond if someone violates their boundaries.
This is an important part of what it means to be a Catholic parent. It is true that the Church must cooperate and assist the parents in doing this. But the parents have an irreplaceable responsibility to ensure that the whole issue of sexuality is dealt with in a healthy way, and that starts at home. A primary vocation of parents is to instill in their children the values of faith, the values of self-respect and self-dignity. From a spiritual point of view, the parents are there to help the children realize how special they are to God and to help their children accept God's love. To the extent that we are able to accept God's love for us, His unconditional love of each of us personally, we will then be able to better respect ourselves and to protect ourselves.
Children need to know the names of their body parts, their eyes and their ears and their elbows, and their private parts. And once children know the names of their private parts, then we can teach them how those parts are different from the other parts of their body, and that most people don't have permission to touch them there. One thing you can do is to use an example of something in your household that the child needs permission to touch, and tell the child that their private parts are like that.
Part of the screening process was finding those kids who didn't understand that their private parts were private. They didn't have a name for them, and they didn't know that people weren't supposed to touch them there, and that made it easier for me to victimize against them.
Children who know about their bodies are better able to tell a trusted adult if someone tries to touch them in unacceptable ways. Be sure to give them specific examples of how a person could violate their physical, emotional, or behavioral boundaries.
I would offend against girls that were wearing dresses, and I'd sit them on my lap and slip my hand under their dress, and the dress would overflow over my legs, and so the adults there couldn't see where my hand was at.
I take him to the mall, shop and buy him DVDs and stuff, and we keep it at my house. And once I got him keeping secrets, lying to his parents and doing stuff he wasn't supposed to, anything was possible.
Once you've taught your child to watch out for someone who would violate their boundaries, then you can teach them how to respond. You can teach them to tell the person to stop, to get away from the person, or to go to an adult who can help protect them.
He did it for 2 years. Every chance that he could get. And I let him. Or at least it seems like I could have done something to stop him.
Getting children to talk to parents isn't always easy, especially about something as personal as sexuality.
Well, sex wasn't really something we talked about. I mean, how does mom bring that up with her son? We were always close, but I don't know, maybe if we had talked more.
One of the responsibilities I see of parents in the situation is to maintain open lines of communication with their young people, to not be embarrassed or afraid to bring up the topic of how are things going between their young person and a teacher whose name gets mentioned often, or the youth group leader, or whichever adult is involved in their young person's life at this time. To keep up the communication, to build a sense of trust so that the young person will be open and willing to mention things to their parent that the parent needs to know.
You can make it easier for your children to tell you about sexual abuse if you talk with them about it the way you would any other danger, like crossing the street, or not wearing a seatbelt, or dealing with bullies at school.
Be sure that your children know that they will not be in trouble regardless of what has happened to them, that you love them, that you want to take care of them, and that you'll do everything in your power to keep them safe.
About 2 weeks after I almost got caught, me and Jessica were alone at church again, and I had molested her. And I realized later that I had forgot to reinforce that it was just a secret game. And as soon as her mom showed up to get her, she went and ran and gave her mom a hug, and I heard her tell her mom that Sam hurt by TT.
I molested 81 boys before I got caught. All I had to do was win them over, show their parents that I was a good guy, and get the boy to do some bad stuff. The kid that finally told, I did one thing wrong. I got careless and tried to move too fast.
If I hadn't got caught when I was 15, I would definitely still be an offender.
Ready, set, go!
Keeping children safe from child sexual abuse requires that we all remain vigilant, that we watch for the warning signs, we act when we see the warning signs, and we teach our children ways to protect themselves when we aren't there.
The church really is committed to providing a safe environment for our young people, and I would invite people to challenge us to keep that commitment always in front of our minds, always in our hearts, in our prayers, so that it will flow into our actions on a daily basis.
The commitment that the church is making is a strong one. It is a bold commitment and a non-negotiable commitment. We are in this not simply because of some of the failures of the church in the past. We are in this because it is what we must do as a church. It is not just for this year or next year, protecting our children from sexual abuse. We are in this for the long term. Ours is a commitment that simply does not end.
We are building a special place where our children can grow in faith, where they can know the joy of Christ's unconditional love. Working together, we can make the difference in the lives of the children of the church, of our community, and of the children of the world. With the work of human hands and the gifts of the Holy Spirit, we can answer our call to guide them, love them, and protect them.